When Queen Camilla bent down to speak with Princess Charlotte, she didn't realize that Catherine was watching, and what happened next changed everything. It all started like a typical spring weekend in the royal schedule, planned down to the minute, packed with family obligations and set against the backdrop of Windsor Castle. But something about this particular gathering made Princess Catherine feel uneasy. Over the years, she had learned to trust her instincts, especially when it came to her children. Leave a comment with number 1 and join us as we uncover the royal family's deepest secrets. That day, Charlotte was unusually quiet, not irritable or angry, just withdrawn, as if she were trying to blend into the background. This was completely unlike her. The family had gathered at Windsor Castle for a private lunch, held in honor of one of the Queen Consort's recent charitable initiatives. Occasions like these weren't uncommon, but they brought multiple generations of the royal family together under one roof. Camilla's circle, Catherine's family, and often a mix of extended royals didn't always get along seamlessly. Catherine didn't mind these events, but she was always cautious. While Prince William could comfortably slip into his role, she had to stay alert to everything. That afternoon, Charlotte was asked to join a group of younger royal cousins in a side sitting room. The space was formal enough, but by royal standards, fairly relaxed. The children were expected to behave properly, make polite conversation, and enjoy afternoon tea, while the adults socialized in the main hall. Catherine helped Charlotte to her seat, kissed her forehead, and left the room with one last glance. Everything seemed fine, at least for the moment. But something had changed after that. About 45 minutes into the gathering, Catherine was speaking with a senior courtier when she caught sight of Charlotte walking past an open doorway in the hallway. She wasn't crying, but her face was pale and her lips pressed into a tight, thin line. She looked hurt, not the scraped knee kind of hurt, but something deeper, emotional. Catherine excused herself mid-conversation and followed. She found Charlotte standing alone at the end of the hallway near a service door. The child's hands were tightly clasped in front of her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor. "What happened?" Catherine asked softly. Charlotte hesitated. "Nothing, Mother." But Catherine knelt down to Charlotte's eye level. "I know when something is wrong, dear." Charlotte's voice was soft. "Camilla said you were bragging. She told you not to talk unless asked." Catherine blinked. "When did she say that?" "When I answered a question for Louis," Charlotte said. "We were just playing a guessing game," but she was angry. Catherine didn't respond right away. She pulled Charlotte into a hug, calm on the outside, but inside everything had shifted. She had always tried to maintain peace with Camilla, even if their relationship felt more like a forced dance than a natural bond. Camilla had her own views on hierarchy and decorum, and while she often masked them with a smile, her tone sometimes revealed more than her words. Still, Catherine had believed that the subtle digs and occasional dismissiveness would never be directed at her children. But she had been wrong. Later, Catherine sat beside Charlotte during the family walk through the gardens. Camilla walked ahead arm in arm with King Charles, chatting as if the morning had been entirely without tension. Catherine watched her closely. Now it wasn't just about the comment. It was the fact that Charlotte had felt the need to hide how she was feeling. After the garden walk, the family gathered back inside. Catherine observed everything subtly. At one point, Charlotte reached for a second scone at the buffet table. Camilla turned, glanced down, and said with a half-smile, "Perhaps one is enough, darling. We wouldn't want to appear greedy, would we, once again?" Now Catherine saw it clearly. This wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern. Small moments that on their own might not seem harsh, but when directed repeatedly at the same child, they began to add up. Catherine didn't react right away. She wasn't the type to make a scene, but her silence was always intentional, and now she had every reason not to stay silent any longer. William hadn't noticed anything. He was tied up with Charles and a few senior aides discussing the schedule. But that evening, back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine would bring it up not as a duchess, but as a mother who could no longer ignore what she had seen. But before that conversation could happen, something else occurred. Catherine didn't enter royal life expecting it to be easy. She understood the responsibilities, the unspoken rules, and the need to maintain a public image while facing the realities behind the scenes. But one thing she would never accept and never tolerate was anyone making her child feel small, especially someone within the family. The moment came just after the tea was cleared away. The adults moved into a sitting room connected to the main exhibition hall, an old routine dating back to the Queen's time. The children were allowed to stay for a while before being taken upstairs by the nanny. Charlotte entered with George and Louis, her expression neutral. She sat by the fireplace, flipping through a book taken from the shelf. At that moment, Camilla walked in holding a glass of water, softly laughing with a long-time aide. She looked cheerful. She saw the children, gave a brief smile, then turned back to the adults. But just minutes later, the laughter faded. George and Louis had moved over to their grandfather, standing beside Charles, while Charlotte remained seated in the armchair. A few minutes later, Charlotte politely asked Camilla, "May I play the piano for a bit?" Camilla turned around. "The piano, yes," Charlotte said, "just a little softly." Camilla took a sip of water, then looked directly at her. "Darling, that's not necessary. Let the adults have some peace. Why don't you sit still like a proper little lady, not loud, not cruel, but deliberate?" The words were sharp. Charlotte's cheeks flushed red. She quietly closed her book and folded her hands together. Catherine heard it. She was standing nearby talking with Lady Lansdowne. Her eyes shifted from Charlotte to Camilla. She didn't say anything right away, but her gaze lingered longer than usual, and Camilla noticed. Their eyes met for a moment before Camilla looked away. The room carried on. Conversations resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. That night at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine put Charlotte to bed herself. The house was quieter now. William was finishing a call with his private secretary, and George was already asleep. Catherine sat on the edge of Charlotte's bed and asked, "Were you upset today?" Charlotte looked uncertain. "A little, but I'm okay. You don't have to pretend," Catherine said gently. Charlotte nodded. "Granny Camilla doesn't like it when I talk too much." It was the truth, direct and unmistakable. Catherine kissed Charlotte's forehead, stood up, and walked down the hallway. Passing William's study, he looked up. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm trying," Catherine replied. William leaned back in his chair. "What happened?" Catherine told him everything, not angrily, but clearly. She repeated Charlotte's words, then described Camilla's cold remarks, the dismissiveness, and the repeated efforts to diminish Charlotte's presence. William listened without interrupting, but when Catherine finished, his jaw clenched. "We can't just ignore this," she said. "I agree," he replied, "but we'll handle it carefully." The next morning, Catherine decided to keep Charlotte home, skipping the next scheduled event. It was a charity garden project that Camilla had arranged for the royal children. Catherine made the excuse that Charlotte had a mild cold, but the truth was, she didn't want her daughter in that environment any longer, not until she was sure it was safe. The news reached Camilla that Charlotte wouldn't be attending. She said little, just raised an eyebrow when an aide mentioned it. Then she muttered, "Probably too delicate to handle a bit of mud." Catherine heard that too. Royals often say more than they admit. The situation might have ended there, if not for what happened the following weekend. It was a small, private dinner at Highgrove. Charles had invited both William and Catherine, hoping for a relaxed evening. The plan was simple: spend family time, reconnect, and discuss upcoming royal tours. But when Catherine entered the main sitting room with Charlotte, who had only come to say goodnight to her grandfather before bed, things escalated quickly. Camilla barely looked up from her chair by the fireplace. Charlotte entered, offering a polite smile, and said, "Good evening, Granny." Camilla didn't return the smile. Instead, she said, "You're not too tired to be here? I hope it was a thinly veiled jab," and everyone in the room heard it. Catherine's eyes never left Camilla. This time, she didn't wait until afterward. Her silence alone was enough to shift the atmosphere. The polite smile she'd worn upon entering was gone, replaced by something sharper. She turned to Charlotte and said calmly, "Why don't you say goodnight to Grandpa and then head upstairs with Anna?" Charlotte, a little confused, looked at her mother. Catherine nodded gently. The girl walked over to Charles, hugged him, and then left the room with the family nanny. As the door closed, a heavy silence filled the room. Camilla remained seated, still holding her glass of wine. She glanced around, then muttered quietly, "The child's too sensitive, isn't she?" William stiffened. His father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but Catherine stepped forward, choosing her words carefully. "No, she's not too sensitive. She's a child, and she deserves to be spoken to with kindness." Camilla raised an eyebrow. "I didn't mean that. I'm just surprised she's still awake at this hour. There's nothing to be upset about." Catherine didn't blink. "It's not just tonight. This has been happening for weeks. I've heard what's been said to her, and so has she." The room grew colder. Charles tried to intervene. "Darling, perhaps we should—" "No," Catherine cut him off, calm but firm. "If it were just a single comment, we might let it go. But this isn't one time. It's a pattern, and I won't stand by while my daughter is made to feel lesser." Camilla looked to William, hoping he would speak, but he remained silent. His silence spoke louder than words. "I've tried to keep the peace," Catherine continued, "because that's what's expected of me. I've overlooked the off moments. But this is different. This involves Charlotte, and I will not let anyone, no matter who they are, undermine her confidence." Camilla set down her glass of wine and finally leaned forward. "You're reading too much into this," Camilla said. "You always take things too seriously. Children are resilient." Catherine's expression didn't change. Children remember how they are spoken to, especially by those who are meant to protect them. There was no drama. Catherine didn't get angry or raise her voice, but the strength in her tone was undeniable. It was the voice of a mother who had drawn a clear line. William finally spoke up. "We're only asking for basic respect. Charlotte hasn't done anything wrong. She's just being herself. That shouldn't be a problem." Camilla looked to Charles, but he remained silent. He knew better than to intervene. Catherine was drawing a line, and once she had, there was no turning back. After a few tense minutes, Catherine excused herself and left. William followed shortly after. Upstairs, Catherine sat again by Charlotte's bed. This time, she didn't ask if something was wrong. She simply held her daughter's hand. "You haven't done anything wrong," she told Charlotte. "You were polite, you were kind, and that's all I ask of you." Charlotte looked up at her mother. "I tried." "You don't have to try to be perfect," Catherine said. "You just have to be yourself." Downstairs, Charles tried to ease the tension by changing the subject. Camilla said little. She didn't apologize, but she also didn't offer any further justification. That night at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine and William talked in their private room. Catherine remained calm, but the day had clearly worn on her. "She doesn't have to like me," she said, "but she must respect Charlotte. That's non-negotiable." "She will," William replied. "Because we won't let this go on." The days that followed remained polite but different. The next event was Charlotte's school performance at Lambrook, and Catherine decided to invite only close family. Camilla was not invited. The palace cited a scheduling conflict, but those involved knew the true meaning. In the press, nothing changed. Smiling photos were released as usual, showing unity and grace. But behind palace walls, a shift had taken place. Camilla still appeared at major events, but she kept her distance from Charlotte. There were no more offhand remarks, no lingering glances, at least not within Catherine's earshot. But Catherine had drawn a clear line. And even in a family built on centuries of hierarchy and deference, some boundaries cannot be crossed without consequences. However, things were far from settled. Camilla had been warned, but she hadn't forgotten. And the next time the family gathered at Balmoral in the summer, another moment pushed everything to the brink. Balmoral has always been Charles's refuge, a place to breathe, to walk, to think, without the glare of cameras. For decades, it was the late Queen's favorite retreat, and the family still honors that rhythm. Every summer, they gather there. It's tradition. But this year, beneath the fresh Scottish air and peaceful countryside, the mood had shifted. Catherine agreed to come, but with boundaries. She and William brought all 3 children as usual. Yet Catherine made it clear to William that she would never leave Charlotte alone even for a moment with Camilla. Everyone arrived according to the multi-day schedule. Charles was the first to greet them at the estate, arms open and cheerful. He adored his grandchildren and looked forward to spending time with them. Camilla arrived a day later, accompanied by her usual entourage and a carefully selected wardrobe. She had remained silent since the incident at Highgrove. She hadn't spoken directly to Catherine since then, only exchanging brief, formal words at public events. The first few days at Balmoral passed peacefully, long walks, horseback riding, dinners filled with laughter. Charlotte began to relax. Catherine saw her daughter gradually return to herself, chatting animatedly at breakfast, running across the fields with George and Louis, even helping a kitchen staff member bake cakes one afternoon. But then the moment came while Catherine was in the sitting room with Lady Sarah Chatto and a few aides. William had gone fishing with Charles. The children were playing in the garden, supervised by 2 staff members. It was the first time since arriving that Catherine had taken her eyes off them for more than 5 minutes. Then a palace aide leaned in and said, "I believe Princess Charlotte is in the sunroom with the Queen." Catherine froze. She didn't move immediately, but those words echoed in her mind. Without explanation, she excused herself and quickly made her way toward the sunroom. As she approached, she heard 2 voices. One was Camilla's, the other Charlotte's. Catherine paused and listened. "We don't always have to drown out others," Camilla was saying. "What matters is listening. Sometimes your mother forgets that too." Charlotte didn't respond. Catherine opened the door. Camilla looked up surprised. "I'm looking for you," Catherine said evenly. "I'm looking for you, my dear." Charlotte stood up and walked straight to her mother. "We were just having a conversation," Camilla said, her tone gentle but with a hint of edge. "I heard that," Catherine replied. Camilla raised an eyebrow. "The child was just—" Catherine cut her off, still calm. "The child is just a child, and she doesn't need to be corrected every time she speaks." Camilla crossed her arms. "I've raised children. I know when a girl is growing up too fast for her own good." "The child is growing up just fine," Catherine said firmly, "and she will do so without being made to feel like a problem." There was no yelling, just clarity, the kind that leaves no room for argument. "I want to see more kindness shown around her," Catherine added. That shouldn't be too much to ask. Camilla said nothing. Her silence was calculated. But Catherine no longer cared. She had spent years protecting the institution. Now her focus had shifted to something far more important, protecting her daughter. After they left the room, Catherine knelt beside Charlotte in the hallway. "You did nothing wrong," she whispered. Charlotte nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "You never have to be afraid to speak up," Catherine told her. By the end of the weekend, palace staff noticed that Camilla kept her distance. During meals, she sat farther away from the children. She made no comments about their behavior, clothing, or tone. It was a subtle shift, but in the royal world, subtlety means everything. Catherine didn't explode. She didn't cause a scandal, but her presence drew a boundary no one could cross. Even Charles, who hoped time would ease the tensions, knew better than to intervene. He loved both women dearly, but he understood that when Catherine stood firm, she did so with reason and final resolve. That summer ended with the familiar photos, the family on the castle steps, smiling for the press, waving to supporters. But inside, everything had changed. Camilla had lost what she hadn't realized was slipping away the tolerance Catherine had maintained for the sake of appearances. That tolerance was gone now, and while the world saw a united royal family behind closed doors, a mother had made sure her daughter would never feel small again. Thank you for watching the entire video. Please like and subscribe to support our channel, or the frame is static, perfect. The most distinguished members of the lineage arranged in flawless order, but notice that single accent of color. That attire wasn't just a choice, it was a statement intended to seize the spotlight. However, if you look past the silk and focus on the symbol of power at the very top, you'll see the cracks. A subtle tremor is about to shake the stone walls of Buckingham. What has been referred to as the Crown Incident is not merely a dispute over jewelry. According to systems analysts, it represents a collision between inherited tradition and the desire to assert present-day authority. Notably, the response from the first in line to the throne, William, is precisely the factor that has caused the palace's once solid structure to begin showing fractures invisible to the naked eye. By late October, the atmosphere within the palace no longer retained its customary stillness. It transformed into a massive machine operating at maximum capacity, preparing for two highly symbolic events: the Booker Prize ceremony and the monarch's birthday milestone. Within this context, observers noted a direct and decisive intervention from the Queen. She did not limit herself to a coordinating role. Rather, she appeared intent on re-establishing the aesthetic order of the entire space, from rare flowers sourced across borders to exquisitely crafted Italian fabrics. In a world governed by symbols, such perfectionism is often understood as an attempt to lock in control. Just when everything seemed to be placed exactly where it belonged, an unexpected gap emerged within the symbolic archive, the crown. Why could a single piece of jewelry cause such profound disruption? In royal systems analysis, each crown functions as a source code of history and hierarchy. The choice of which object appears before the public is a silent declaration of the wearer's position within the flow of time. The deadlock arose when the existing options failed to meet the visual demands of two critical events. Older pieces were deemed incompatible with the new language of color, and it was precisely at the intersection of this impasse and the need to assert authority that a pivotal decision was made. The gaze of preference shifted toward a collection long associated with the image of the Princess of Wales, Kate. On the evening of November 4th, beneath the dim golden lights of history-laden corridors, a meeting took place. The object in question was the Oriental Circle, a jewelry masterpiece steeped in deep hereditary significance and long regarded as a symbol intrinsically tied to Kate's elegance. The hypothesis raised here is this. Was it merely a temporary request to reallocate an asset for shared aesthetic purposes, or was it a signal of a deeper shift in the internal rules governing priority and privilege? A negotiation over symbols had begun, yet the manner in which it unfolded, silent and heavy with pressure, set an unprecedented precedent. Within the hushed stillness of the palace corridor, the exchange between the two central figures was far more than a discussion about accessories. It was a collision between present authority and future design. The queen, her tone composed, yet carrying the weight of absolute power, put forward a proposition meant to assert control. In response, the Princess of Wales chose to defend systemic order and the meticulous preparation she had established. But when arguments of aesthetic logic were brushed aside, a new lens came into focus, the lens of status. The phrase "don't forget who I am" was not merely a reminder of title, but a message aimed at reasserting the hierarchy of priorities within the royal system. Here, respect for procedure collided head-on with the steel wall of supreme authority. Buckingham Palace the following morning was no longer a smoothly operating machine. The whispers circulating through the corridors were clear signs of informational turbulence. When lower-level staff witnessed fractures forming at the very top, confidence in established norms of conduct began to erode. The peak of the disruption unfolded at the very heart of the royal treasury, the repository of priceless legacies. The arrival of security personnel and designers acting in the Queen's name without the princess's consent triggered a crisis of authorization protocol. This was no longer a routine working session but a unilateral campaign of asset requisition. The reaction of the officer guarding the treasures stood as a representation of the conscience of tradition. The question of Catherine's consent was a final attempt to preserve the boundaries of hereditary protocol. However, the cold response, "Catherine is not the Queen," put a definitive end to any debate over ownership. In the realm of supreme symbols, the needs of the one at the top are regarded as the command of the crown, overriding all personal arrangements and individual dignity. When the Oriental Circle, crown an emblem of refinement and legacy, was lifted from its familiar place, a true shift in power was completed within the shadows of the royal treasury. This event left behind a heavy atmosphere where Catherine's silence and William's decisive reaction appear to be preparing the ground for a new undercurrent of upheaval. When the rules of respect and hierarchy are stretched to their absolute limits, can the palace's structure still maintain its inherent stability? In a system where symbols equal power, will the prioritization of personal authority or the protection of hereditary order determine the survival of royal prestige? And if it were, would you stand with the current order or with the continuity of the future? And if it were you, would you stand with the current order or with the continuity of the future? Leave your opinion in the comments by pressing 2 if you support absolute adherence to royal authority, or 5 if you believe mutual respect among members is the core value. If these systems-based analyses have given you a fresh and deeper perspective on the mysteries behind Buckingham's velvet curtain, don't forget to hit like to support us. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming investigative reports, where we continue to decode the power source codes reshaping the royal world day by day. It did not stop at a single artifact. The requisition expanded to encompass the very core symbols most closely associated with the image of the Princess of Wales. First came the Cambridge Lover's Knot, a creation infused with the breath of the past, once tied to the memory of Diana, and now a defining hallmark of Kate. Next was the lotus flower tiara, a symbol of grace and refinement. The simultaneous transfer of all three treasures out of Kate's sphere of stewardship, placed under the Queen's temporary authority, could no longer be dismissed as a mere technical coincidence. Analysts suggest that this was a strategy of a full-scale assault on the image archive, designed to blur the personal imprint of the heir during major ceremonial moments. News of the disappearance of these symbols reached Catherine at 4:30 p.m., the moment when the quiet of her private room was broken by the arrival of John Harrington, the keeper of the Royal Treasury keys. The tension visible in Harrington's demeanor stood as evidence of a system slipping out of sync. When the rules of consent were pushed aside, a fundamental question came sharply into focus. Who truly holds the authority to determine the fate of royal legacies? Catherine's reaction, a silence charged with tension before erupting into a softly spoken yet sharply pointed question, revealed that she recognized this was no longer a mere procedural misunderstanding, but a direct challenge to her position. Catherine chose not to remain silent. Her advance into the Queen's private office was an act that broke the usual restraint. Within a room teeming with witnesses from aides to designers, a debate over boundaries and power erupted. When Catherine invoked the concepts of respect and protocol, she was defending the long-standing operational structure of the palace. In contrast, Camilla's response, "I take them because I can," was a declaration of the supreme authority of the reigning monarch. In this system, power requires no explanation, it demands only execution. Catherine's statement. "This will never be forgotten" was not merely a personal warning, but a signal that a subtle shift within the heart of the royal family had officially begun. As night fell, a veneer of silence enveloped the palace. Yet it was precisely at this moment that a new player emerged, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, the keeper of the most sensitive internal information. Eleanor's hesitation over a message from the wardrobe team hinted at a larger scheme being orchestrated behind the scenes. Was there something about the crowns being removed that went beyond mere decoration? Could a physical restructuring or even a political message have been embedded within the act? The story of the crown is evolving from an internal dispute into a full-blown crisis of succession and trust. Will Eleanor Whitmore's appearance serve as the key to decoding the mystery, or is it merely the beginning of a deeper fracture? In the world of thick stone walls, no secret is absolute. Information decoded from the wardrobe team revealed a shocking truth. The lotus flower tiara, a highly symbolic and cherished item, was not being requisitioned for the reigning monarch. Internal reports suggested that it was being prepared for an entity outside the official royal system. Assigning a national treasure for the personal use of those without monarchical responsibility constitutes a serious protocol breach. For Catherine, this was no longer a mere dispute over jewelry. It was a violation of the core values of integrity and hereditary protocol. A subtle message had been sent that traditional boundaries were being challenged by personal priorities. When these fundamental values are compromised, the consequences extend beyond confrontations. They seep into the most private spaces of the family. The sensitivity of the next generation, George and Charlotte, serves as the most precise barometer of the pressures Catherine is enduring. Through an analytical lens, the silence and chill of the palace that night represented the cost of maintaining dignity. Catherine chose not to respond with an outburst of anger, but with strategically measured endurance. Yet a deeply personal humiliation had left a fracture that no diplomatic procedure could easily erase. But systems always have self-correcting mechanisms. The following morning, a new current of energy spread through the corridors, signals of the earlier-than-expected return of Prince William and Princess Anne. Within the power structure, this was seen as the emergence of traditional protective forces. Their return carried not only emotional significance, but also strategic weight aimed at restoring the disrupted order. For Catherine, Williams' presence was more than comfort. It represented the hope for a systemic recovery where boundaries and respect could be properly reinstated. The moment Catherine picked up the phone to call William, his warm voice on the other end served as a balm amidst the brewing undercurrent. Yet the question remained, would this return possess enough force to reverse decisions that had already been executed? Or would it instead mark the beginning of a larger direct confrontation between two generations of power at Buckingham? In a strictly hierarchical system, information is often a weapon, but at times it becomes a form of artificial sedative. The confirmation of the mix-up regarding William's return date was not merely a scheduling mishap. From a systems psychology perspective, it was a forced pause. Catherine faced the reality that her safest anchor remained out of reach, leaving her isolated in the eye of the storm created by broken rules. Restraint and royal dignity were no longer options. They had become a heavy suit of armor, gradually draining the wearer's strength. On November 7th, the arrival of William and Princess Anne acted like an electric jolt, reactivating the palace's energy network. The laughter of the children and the presence of their protective figures temporarily masked the fractures at the base of the stone walls. However, discerning observers would notice that Catherine's smile, though genuine, was only a temporary solution. The system might appear stable on the surface, but when the clamor of duties subsides, the truth still waits in the most private corners. A dialogue of crisis decryption was about to begin. In the private room, the only space where protocol could not intrude, the calm that Catherine had painstakingly maintained began to unravel. William, with the intuition of a future head of state, immediately recognized the structural cracks etched on his wife's face. What Catherine shared was far more than a personal story. It was a report on a breach of authority. Recounting Camilla's demands, the way words were wielded to diminish her position, and ultimately the requisition of the 3 crowns without approval, all painted a portrait of a silent yet decisive symbolic coup. The 3 crowns that were taken were more than priceless pieces of jewelry. In the language of power, this was an act of erasing the presence of the heir. Executing it in William's absence demonstrated a calculated timing designed to maximize the target's vulnerability. Catherine was not merely recounting the loss of objects. She was narrating the erosion of trust and the respect for boundaries, 2 pillars that uphold the royal structure against the pressures of personal ambition. The dialogue in the darkness of the private room closed the first half of the crisis, but it opened a new chapter: William's resistance. With the protective system now activated, Buckingham Palace was set to witness a confrontation between 2 generations of power, more pronounced than ever. What do you think the simultaneous removal of the 3 crowns signifies? Comment if you believe it was an act asserting the Queen's ultimate ownership over all royal legacies. Want to explore William's dramatic reaction when facing Camilla the following morning? Hit follow, and we'll return with the most exclusive analyses. In the deepest analyses of power psychology, the Queen's actions went beyond merely borrowing an item. From Catherine's perspective, it was an attempt to neutralize presence. In front of the staff, the operators of the palace machinery, diminishing the position of an heir, sent a clear message about a shift in the hierarchy of priorities. The final blow was not in the possession itself, but in its purpose, assigning a royal treasure for the personal use of someone outside the official system constituted a principled misalignment. At this moment, Catherine's tears were not merely personal grief, but the shattering of trust in a system of fair and transparent governance. To understand why this event caused such a shock, we need to examine the deeper significance of the three artifacts that were relocated the Oriental Circle. The Pillar of Serenity. This is not a symbol of ostentation, but a reminder of a leadership style that requires no fanfare yet carries immense weight. It represents the inner balance that Catherine has painstakingly cultivated. The Cambridge Lover's Knot, the generational link. This piece carries the coded memory of a legendary figure, Diana. Wearing it is not merely an act of display, but an act of continuing the mission. When this item was taken, that spiritual link was directly violated. The lotus flower tiara, the symbol of transformation. For Catherine, this represents her mark of growth and adaptability in adversity. Its requisition for purposes outside royal duties was seen as a profane act against the values it embodies. William's reaction, a silence heavy with the promise of the coming storm, signaled that the protective system had officially been activated. His words, that is unacceptable, were not merely the comfort of a husband, but a declaration of a guardian of future order. In a world of hidden boundaries, when respect is replaced by the imposition of power, confrontation becomes inevitable. The safety Catherine felt leaning against William's shoulder was the calm before a campaign of status restoration began. At 6:54 a.m., a strategic decision was made to break all customary waiting procedures. In crisis management theory, William's action is referred to as a direct intervention. Catherine and William's preparation extended beyond words into the realm of visual language. Their attire, minimalist, formal, and exuding steadfastness, sent a non-verbal message to the entire palace. This was not a family visit, but an inquiry into the integrity of protocol. The unannounced appearance at the monarch's office was a rare move, disrupting Buckingham's carefully programmed operational schedule. When King Charles's office door closed, the space became a true crisis management room. Here, Catherine presented the matter with absolute control over her emotions. She did not speak of sadness. She spoke of a serious breach of protocol. By detailing the three symbols, the Oriental Circle, the Cambridge Lover's Knot, and the lotus flower tiara, she was reasserting control over the heritage portfolio entrusted to her. The crucial factor that forced King Charles to change his stance was this detail: the incident occurred openly in front of staff without the consent of the directly responsible party. In the royal system, this is considered a serious systemic breach, threatening the stability of the hierarchical structure. When William asserted that it was the Queen who issued the directive, the dialogue shifted from an internal dispute to a power control confrontation. Does sovereign authority have the right to override established protocols to protect the monarchy's reputation? The climax of the analysis centers on the use of the lotus flower tiara. When Catherine revealed that a national treasure had been diverted outside the system for the personal use of someone without royal responsibility, she touched the ultimate limit of tolerance within tradition. This was no longer a matter of aesthetics or priority, it was a question of legitimacy. Misusing heritage symbols risks eroding public trust in the professionalism of the monarchy. King Charles's tense reaction indicated that he fully grasped the magnitude of this breach. In the confined space of the monarch's office, words like inappropriate carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. When Catherine asserted that a heritage item had been removed from the royal circle for personal use, she was not merely complaining about a piece of jewelry. She was highlighting a breach of public duty ethics within the palace. King Charles's reaction, a heavy sigh, and rubbing his temples, revealed a leader recognizing fractures within his own team. William's insistence that this was an act of abuse of power to diminish status transformed the conversation into a hearing on fairness. Here, the boundary between sovereign authority and personal respect was put on the scales. The moment King Charles pressed the button to summon the Queen marked an unprecedented turning point in modern history. It signaled a shift from quiet reconciliation to direct confrontation. As the Queen entered with her usual confidence, a clash between two governance ideologies erupted. The Queen's doctrine viewing royal items as institutional tools, where supreme power can be flexibly exercised to assert AOT. The heir's doctrine viewing royal items as heritage and boundaries, where respect for protocol forms the foundation that prevents the system from being eroded by personal whims. The Queen's remark about flexing the rules when others forget their place was a direct shot at the existing hierarchical structure. King Charles's intervention at the end of the dialogue served as a reaffirmation of the endurance of principle. By declaring, "This family does not operate that way," he was making an effort to restore the balance that had been disrupted. This was not merely about defending Catherine, it was about safeguarding the very reputation of the crown against the threats of overreach. Yet is such decisiveness enough to quell the undercurrents? As the Queen's assertiveness met the heir's steadfastness under the monarch's watchful eye, a new chapter of uncertainty unfolded for Buckingham. In these tense moments within the King's office, we witnessed a rare instance of sovereign order executing a decisive self-correction. King Charles's assertion was not just a personal ruling, it activated a reputation preservation mechanism. The order to return the 3 tiaras immediately, and more importantly, the revocation of the Queen's right to use these symbols at the upcoming major events, constituted a form of symbolic demotion. In the royal world, where presence is inseparable from objects of power appearing without them, sends a silent message of a systemic reprimand. Within just a few hours, the artifacts were returned to their original positions in the treasury. This was a covert yet thorough incident containment campaign. During the Booker Prize ceremony and the birthday events, the public saw only an image of the Queen in elegant minimalist jewelry. From a media perspective, this was hailed as modernization. From a systems analysis perspective, it was the result of an internal disciplinary ruling. The absence of the tiara on the Queen's head represented a calculated power gap, a loaded silence behind Buckingham's stone walls. The true climax of this investigation unfolded weeks later at a state banquet. When Catherine entered wearing the Eastern Circle, tiara order had been fully restored. Her choice of this particular tiara, the very piece that sparked the entire crisis, was no coincidence. It was an act of reasserting ownership. Catherine did not wear it to display beauty. She wore it as a statement of legitimacy. In a system where power can be contested, composure and dignity serve as the strongest barriers to protect personal boundaries. The story of the tiaras closed with a profound lesson on the structure of respect. We recognize that in a long-standing institution, status does not come solely from titles. It must also be earned through conduct and adherence to core values. Prince William, in his role as future guardian, took a bold step to protect the nucleus of his family. This intervention sent a steel-clad message: any attempt to erase someone's presence or diminish their dignity will be met with the power of tradition and reason. What do you think about how the royal system self-corrected in this situation? Is Prince William's decisiveness, coupled with King Charles's ruling, enough to establish a lasting boundary for the future? It's important to note that this entire analysis is built on hypotheses and unpublished public perspectives, aiming to provide the most multidimensional and objective view of what is happening behind closed doors. We are not just watching a story unfold, we are decoding the source code of one of the oldest institutions in the world. Don't stay passive, interact with me. Press 1 for curiosity or 0 for skepticism. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue unraveling the secrets hidden behind the palace curtain. Within the structure of a long-standing institution, for an individual to embody the core values of the nation is not only an honor, but also a form of systemic pressure. Princess Anne and King Charles, two pillars of traditional order, have long been regarded as the perfect custodians of the strictest rules. Yet behind the quietude of ceremonial rituals, there appear to be undercurrents of emotion and history that time cannot erase. Could there be an invisible boundary gradually fading? Are the secrets kept for decades truly shadows? Or are they the missing pieces needed to decode the true essence of the resilience we continue to witness? We will not chase rumors. Instead, we will analyze the interactions between individuals within a system governed by age-old conventions. One of the most noteworthy aspects is the relationship between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla. On television, the world sees a harmonious blend of etiquette. However, from a systems psychology perspective, this harmony seems to lack a genuine emotional connection. A static distance exists between them. This isn't a direct conflict, but rather the presence of historical boundaries that have never been bridged. This estrangement is not a random occurrence. It seems to be the inevitable result of a series of events that unfolded decades ago when concepts of duty and affection began to intersect, creating complex variables. To understand reality, we must go back to a time when the old order still reigned supreme. Before becoming part of the power structure, Camilla was associated with Andrew Parker Bowles, a figure with a particularly deep connection to Princess Anne. Here we see a hypothesis of personal sacrifice in the face of systemic barriers. Princess Anne and Andrew once shared a genuine connection. But at the time, differences in faith and the strict rules of the church created an insurmountable wall between them. It's not just a story of two individuals, it's a clash between the yearning for freedom and institutional order. Princess Anne's choice of Andrew as godfather for her daughter Zara demonstrates a timeless appreciation, a bond enduring despite social labels. The complexity intensifies as timelines intertwine, forcing each person to follow a different path. King Charles, then a young prince, entered Camilla's life. An attraction based on calmness and understanding blossomed, but once again the system spoke up. Standards of suitability, family expectations, and military service created a fateful silence. When Charles returned, the old picture had been replaced by a new reality, the marriage of Camilla and Andrew. A cycle of regret and repressed emotions was formed. Could it be that these very knots have created a psychological legacy that influences how members of the royal family interact with each other to this day? Every system operates on a balance between individual ego and collective expectations. When personal emotions are forced to give way to symbolic values, what happens to the truths behind them? What do you think of this hypothesis? Were the strict rules of the past tools for protecting stability, or are they the very source of the silent rifts we are seeing? Time may fade memories, but within the structure of a symbolic family, it often deepens underlying bonds. Princess Anne, after establishing her own path with rigorous royal duties, maintained an invisible but enduring connection with Andrew Parker Bowles. Here we face an intriguing variable. When Camilla entered her formal marriage to King Charles, a complex web of relationships was formed. The woman at the center of the current system had once been intimately connected to both Anne's confidant and her brother. From a systems analysis perspective, this is not simply a love story, but an overlapping of social roles, creating significant psychological pressure on the stability of internal relationships. Princess Anne has always been considered the embodiment of the traditional model, where devotion, order, and adherence to rules are never allowed to be shaken. For a mindset that values consistency so highly, the appearance of Camilla is not just an addition to the family, but a sign of disruptive change. Could it be that in the mind of a heritage guardian, Camilla's presence also evokes the most turbulent periods of the royal family? This contrast isn't an open war, but rather a difference between two sets of values. One representing absolute steadfastness to the past and the other symbolizing adaptation and restructuring after setbacks. For decades, this quietude has been maintained as a shield protecting the public image. However, as roles within the palace begin to be redefined, the cracks in this relationship are gradually becoming apparent. Respect in the royal world is never a free gift. It's a currency that must be accumulated over time and through trials. Their interactions, described as minimal politeness, are in fact a systemic defense mechanism. There are no direct confrontations, no harsh words, only carefully calculated distances. For Anne, acceptance seems like a rigorous verification process. Can an individual truly integrate into the system if they have been a disruptive force in the past? Camilla, in her position, understood that entering an established structure was a journey fraught with prejudice. Princess Anne's strength and assertiveness mirrored the expectations the system placed upon her. In her silent struggle for acceptance, the story wasn't just about who was right and who was wrong, but about how to reconcile old wounds into a shared future. We have journeyed through layers of time, from the harsh rules of faith to the intricate web of personal relationships. Behind the diplomatic smiles and formal ceremonies lies a complex tapestry of sacrifice, responsibility, and emotions never officially named. In a system that values stability, like the monarchy, do forgiveness and acceptance truly exist, or is it all just a perfect arrangement to maintain the survival of a symbol? And if you were in their position, would you choose to uphold old principles or open yourself to a new beginning fraught with uncertainty? In any hierarchy, recognition comes not from words, but from action. Camilla, in her quest for a legitimate place, embarked on what we might call a demonstration of duty. Instead of merely appearing as a symbol alongside King Charles, she became deeply involved in charitable structures and community missions. Under the watchful eye of Princess Anne, who considered devotion the sole measure, a subtle shift occurred. As instinctive resistance subsided, it was replaced by professional recognition. However, we need to analyze carefully. Does this recognition equate to warmth? The answer seems to lie in the gap between two different worldviews. Here we see an implicit dialogue between two schools of thought. Princess Anne, the silence of the rock. She represents the classic royal mindset where duty is performed quietly, without the need for praise and completely detached from the media spotlight. Camilla, modern adaptation. Entering the system from the outside, she understands that the existence of the monarchy in the 21st century requires a bridge connecting with the public through understanding and positive communication. This difference didn't create enemies, but it created two parallel paths that would never intersect. For Anne, the crown was an eternal burden. For Camilla, it was a journey of constant learning. The moment King Charles officially ascended the throne was also the moment the established standards were put to the test. In private meetings behind the palace curtains, Princess Anne played the role of guardian of the standards. Without harsh words, Anne posed a fundamental question: can the devotion of a spouse be measured by time or by genuine transformation? This was not a personal attack, but a test of loyalty to the institution. For someone who had dedicated her life to unconditional service like Anne, the level of devotion was a very high threshold that not everyone could easily cross. As the system sought to stabilize after the upheavals, a new light emerged, altering the entire distribution of energy within the palace. Catherine, Princess of Wales. If Camilla represented the effort to adapt, Catherine embodied a natural harmony. The Princess of Wales not only received public support, but also evoked memories of an ideal role model from the past. From an analysis of her influence, we see a psychological eclipse phenomenon, no matter how hard Camilla tries. Catherine's radiant and amiable presence seems to be casting an invisible shadow. Catherine's rise is not just a story of fame. It is the emergence of a new balancing point in the royal family. Someone who can connect Anne's rigorous values with the approachability of the new generation. We are witnessing a power struggle between positions and influence. While Princess Anne remains a firm moral compass, Camilla faces a new challenge, not only gaining acceptance within the family, but also finding her own voice amidst the powerful allure of the next generation. What is your hypothesis? Is Princess Anne's strictness necessary to uphold the core values of the royal family? Or is the presence of new figures like Catherine the key to this institution's continued existence in the public eye based on analyses of the character and depth of these royal figures? Let's leave comment number 2. If you are impressed with how they are asserting their position and preserving their heritage, leave a comment. Number 5. If you notice other mysteries still waiting to be solved in the future, don't forget to press like and subscribe to the channel book now to avoid missing out on the most insightful analyses of the world of power symbols. In a system built on titles, the emergence of a middle-class figure like Catherine, Princess of Wales, created an interesting breakpoint. One theory suggests that Catherine's sophistication stemmed not from her lineage, but from a combination of modern education and self-effort. This creates a paradox. While the world admired Catherine's approachability within the confines of the ancient walls, she was a challenge to established norms. Could the underlying distance between Camilla and Catherine not be merely personal prejudice, but rather a resistance from an old order to a model of popular monarchy? Catherine represents a future where public support is the true measure of power, something Camilla, no matter how hard she tries, always faces obstacles from the past. Here we see two contrasting journeys. Camilla's journey, a journey of redemption and perseverance over decades to gradually gain acceptance. Catherine's journey, an almost immediate explosion of faith and love. This contrast created systemic pressure on the role of the queen consort. While Camilla relied on experience and perseverance to assert her position, Catherine used soft power, kindness, and modern style to become the soul of the new era. It was a silent competition where every step, every smile was a message about who would truly redefine the image of the royal family in the public eye. Amidst the undercurrents of fame and influence, Princess Anne remained a guiding landmark. As tensions among the female members of the family showed signs of escalating, Anne took what analysts called asserting priorities. Instead of engaging in debates about media image, Anne focused on strengthening the crown's power structure. She chose to act quietly but decisively, prioritizing core tasks that she believed were essential to the institution's survival. Her actions were not merely fulfilling her duty, but a message to both Camilla and Catherine that glamour may come and go, but responsibility to the crown is constant. Our investigation into the hidden corners of the palace has revealed a multifaceted picture: Anne's meticulousness, Camilla's persistent efforts, and Catherine's modern appeal. Three women, three representatives of different periods of history, are together creating a turbulent new chapter for the British monarchy. If you were at the helm, would you prioritize the steadfastness of tradition, like Princess Anne, or the modern adaptability of Catherine? Can Camilla truly overcome the shadow of the past when the standards of the ideal queen are gradually changing with the next generation? And finally, how will Princess Anne's next actions affect the power structure between Camilla and Catherine? Is her silence an acceptance or a warning of impending upheaval? While discussions about the royal family's future continue in London, Princess Anne chooses to appear in a highly symbolic setting: Guernsey Island. This was not merely a diplomatic visit, but a journey into the core of history, where 80 years ago the concepts of freedom and resilience were redefined after the dark years of World War II. From a systemic perspective, Princess Anne's presence at the 80th anniversary of Liberation Day was a strategic move to strengthen the living thread. She represented not only the crown, but also the continuation of a legacy left by Queen Elizabeth II, the royal presence in vital moments for the nation. A remarkable aspect of Princess Anne's approach is her breaking down of ceremonial barriers to connect with personal stories. When she takes the time to listen to the elderly, the last remaining witnesses of the occupation, a historical energy exchange takes place. She doesn't seek glamorous photos for the media. Her attentiveness is a message of recognition. For those who have lived through fear and loss, Anne's presence is like an affirmation that their sacrifices are an integral part of the national fabric. This is how the royal family maintains its legitimacy, not through social media posts, but by being the keepers of the flame for the most important memories. At the solemn church ceremony, Princess Anne's speech carried special weight. Her affirmations of not being forgotten were not merely words of comfort, but a commitment from the institution. In particular, her conveying warm congratulations from King Charles created a resonance effect. We see a well-coordinated mechanism. The king entrusts his faith, and Princess Anne, as the most dedicated executor, translates that faith into practical action. Recalling the hospitality received by King Charles and Queen Camilla a year earlier is also a clever way to unite the royal family members, despite the differences in personal styles we've analyzed earlier. The subsequent journey to Sark Island, a small but historically rich community, further clarifies Anne's philosophy. No community is too small to be forgotten. Her unwavering commitment to this memorial tour, despite the pressures and demanding schedule, demonstrates an ironclad sense of responsibility. It is her way of protecting the crown, by being present where it is most needed at the most meaningful time. Princess Anne's trip to the Channel Islands painted a stark contrast to the media frenzy at the palace. While the world was busy comparing Catherine's modernity with Camilla's efforts to adapt, Anne quietly built bridges between the past and the present. A hypothesis for us to ponder. Could it be that these quiet, historically significant journeys are what truly keep the monarchy standing against the storms of the digital age? In a world changing so rapidly, is Princess Anne's steadfastness to the past an outdated value or an indispensable spiritual anchor for the people? How do you assess the way Princess Anne represented King Charles in these historical events? When a royal visit sheds its rigid ceremonial layers, it becomes a reunion of witnessing souls. In Guernsey and Sark, we see not just a princess on duty, but a memory archive in operation. Personal stories, inherently small compared to the grand narrative of history, are the very atoms that make up the power of the crown in this new era. Perhaps the true value of royalty lies in its ability to transform the dry data of war into vibrant emotions. Let's analyze how the last surviving witnesses passed on their historical genetic code to future generations through Princess Anne. Let's consider the case of Winnie Coe. At age 85, the memory of her first chocolate bar was not simply a taste experience. From a systems analysis perspective, it marked the collapse of an isolated order and the rebirth of hope. In an environment where hunger was used as a tool of control, tasting the sweetness of relief packages was an emotional revolution. The contrast between the fear of receiving candy from an enemy soldier and the pure joy of accepting help from an ally creates a complex psychological structure. Princess Anne, by listening to these details, inadvertently acts as an authenticator of the human values that triumphed in the darkest hour. Another aspect of the heritage preservation system is the ability to reconstruct pain. Sally Roberts' story and the poem extracted from wartime letters are a prime example. Instead of being left to rot in a drawer, these old manuscripts were transformed into a public message before the royal court. This was a mechanism of collective spiritual purification. When the poem was read aloud before Princess Anne, it ceased to be the property of a single family and became part of the national heritage. Royal recognition elevated personal emotions to an enduring spiritual value, reminding us that forgetfulness is a second occupation. Finally, let's analyze Jeff Nicholson's reaction to the princess's unannounced visit. In a world where every royal move is meticulously planned down to the second the 30-minute preparation period seems like a test of authenticity. This surprise removed the barriers of elaborate preparation, leaving behind a purely human encounter. This can be seen as a highly effective visible presence strategy. It shows that royalty doesn't just exist in staged events, but that they are always ready to be present in the reality of the people. Princess Anne's journey through the islands was more than just a celebration of the 80th anniversary of liberation. It was a profound inquiry into the power of memory and the role of gratitude in shaping the future. From the sweetness of chocolate to verses from memory, it all created a symphony of resilience. In the digital age where everything moves so fast, are we losing the ability to listen to the small stories that hold such great value as Princess Anne did? Within an institution where stability is measured in centuries, even the slightest shift in the frequency of appearances and public response signals a profound structural realignment. As Princess Anne continues to reinforce the foundations through sheer endurance, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, begins to occupy the emotional space of the public, a systemic question emerges. Where will Queen Camilla's position lie within this new map of influence? From a strategic analytical perspective, we are witnessing an invisible yet extraordinarily powerful convergence between Anne's steel discipline and Catherine's soft power. This convergence is exerting an invisible pressure on the role of the queen consort, compelling the system to recalibrate itself in order to meet the public's increasingly high expectations. A compelling illustration of this soft power was the quiet yet highly symbolic visit by Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, to Guildhall. This was not merely a conventional Holocaust memorial event. It was a lesson in how a modern symbol can connect with humanity's deepest wounds. Catherine's appearance, unconfirmed, until the very last moment generated a distinct psychology of surprise effect. In the world of media, withholding information is not a flaw, but a deliberate strategy to focus attention on the message rather than the ritual. When Catherine entered the room, the atmosphere stirred not merely because of celebrity, but because of the presence of a guardian of memory. What elevated this visit far beyond a royal obligation was the thread of continuity dating back to 2020. Catherine did not simply meet historical witnesses. She applied her own artistic lens to preserve their faces and souls through the commemorative photographs marking the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Here let us examine a hypothesis. When a member of the royal family personally undertakes the preservation of heritage through art, they are no longer an external observer. Catherine has woven herself into the historical continuum of the witnesses. The reunion at Guildhall was not a diplomatic ritual, but a deeply human encounter. Her body language, eye contact, and gentleness testified to a form of systemic empathy, something no title alone can organically confer. In the solemn chamber of Guildhall, amid candlelight and tear-filled speeches, Catherine stood as a bridge between a painful past and a hopeful future. The photographs she had taken years earlier were displayed once more, but this time they carried a different weight. They were evidence of long-term commitment. This contrast poses a genuine challenge for Queen Camilla. While Camilla relies on experience and formal presence, Catherine is building an empire of trust, grounded in empathy and deep personal connections. Could this mark a turning point, one in which Anne's quiet influence and Catherine's increasingly radiant stature redefine who truly embodies the soul of the monarchy? In a world saturated with noise, silence can sometimes be the most powerful language of all. At the memorial ceremony, Catherine did not choose to place herself at the center of speeches. Instead, she chose empathetic presence. By standing quietly observing and listening to the historical witnesses, Catherine demonstrated a fundamental truth of soft power. Respect is not built through words, but through the capacity for genuine empathy. Her gaze never left the survivors, those who had emerged from the ashes of history. It was not the curiosity of a detached observer, but the conviction of a guardian of legacy. Beside her, Prince William reinforced an image of continuity and support. They were not standing there merely as members of the royal family. They stood as bridges between a painful past and the future's responsibility to remember. The photographs Catherine took are not simply visual art. They are mechanisms of historical validation, reminding us that humanity endures even in the darkest of moments. However, behind those quiet and deeply human moments, another reality is silently taking shape within the structure of the monarchy. Let us pose a future-oriented hypothesis. What happens if the central pillar, King Charles, is no longer there to maintain equilibrium? From a systems analysis perspective, Queen Camilla occupies a position that is heavily dependent on the king's support. Should that variable change, a reconfiguration of power would inevitably follow. In such a scenario, Camilla could face a form of institutional isolation. On one side would stand the public's near-universal admiration for Catherine, a symbol of modern empathy. On the other side stands the quiet authority and unshakable credibility of Princess Anne, the guardian of the monarchy's most exacting traditional values. In such a scenario, Queen Camilla's position would be caught between two powerful vices of influence. Would her years of perseverance be enough to hold her ground without the protection of the crown itself? Or would she gradually be pushed away from the epicenter of power, making room for a new era, one in which empathy and tradition are redefined by the Anne-Catherine axis? From Princess Anne's quiet, steady steps to Catherine's presence, charged with soft power, every piece seems to converge toward a future matrix of unpredictable shifts within the monarchy. We are not merely witnessing changes in faces, we are observing a large-scale self-recalibration within a millennia-old institution. How do you assess this shift of focus among the generations of women who hold the monarchy's very soul? Is this a preparation for a new era, or a final effort to uphold values increasingly challenged by time? This content is entirely for reference based on hypotheses and unverified public speculation. Let's discuss it from an objective, analytical perspective. Don't stay silent, engage with me. Press 1 for curiosity and 0 for skepticism. Hit like and subscribe to continue the journey of uncovering the secrets behind the spotlight. See you next time. Eternity and true humanity, one that has forever changed the image of the crown. Do you sympathize with this courage? Comment 1 if you admire it, or 0 if you have a different perspective. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can explore the mystery together. There are moments when time itself seems to stand still, when even the most solid stone walls of history cannot hold back the ripples of change. Buckingham Palace has just released a message that has shaken the hearts of millions. Gone are the rigid formalities of royal protocol. King Charles and Prince William appeared together in a rare moment of shared empathy, opening up about a profoundly challenging chapter in the life of Princess Catherine. For months, speculation hung over London like a thick fog. Yet when the truth was finally revealed, its weight surpassed all imagination. As the world holds its breath, the British royal family is confronting a stark reality, one where titles and crowns offer no shield against the unforgiving laws of nature. Before we unravel the deeper meanings of this turning point for the future of the monarchy, join us by subscribing to stay updated with the most authentic and insightful information. In a rare display of unity, the monarch and his heir stood side by side. On their faces, there was no trace of their usual majesty, only the weight of compassion. For an institution that has long held composure as its guiding principle, this moment marked a painful break from tradition. The words were spoken softly, yet their impact felt like a psychological earthquake. This was not an ordinary medical update. It was a vulnerable confession that shattered the illusion of perfection the palace had carefully upheld for over a century. William, long known for his steely resolve, now appeared with an emotion he could scarcely conceal. His voice, though still measured, carried undertones of uncertainty. King Charles, in a moment that transcended his role as sovereign, referred to Catherine as the heart of the family. This was not merely the voice of a monarch. It was the voice of a father watching a loved one endure the storm. That very sincerity sparked an emotional wave that resonated across the globe. From the flickering candles at Windsor to messages sent across oceans, the world is sharing a solemn, reverent silence. Everything has changed because deep down, we all understand this truth. Behind those gilded iron gates lies a quiet battle for peace. But what led to this heartbreaking turning point To grasp the reality, we must turn back time to the moment when the first cracks began to appear. Princess Catherine's absence was initially regarded as nothing more than a routine period of rest. Yet as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the silence took on the weight of unease. There were no casual photographs, no radiant smiles before the camera's hallmarks of Catherine's public presence. Her complete withdrawal from public life raised a pressing question: was something beyond control unfolding behind the scenes? Even the closest security staff and aides were enveloped in an atmosphere of strict discretion. Privacy was no longer a choice. It had become the final fortress protecting what mattered most. When official engagements were canceled without clear explanation, and when representatives began relying on vague language, the public understood they were witnessing something unprecedented. An anonymous staff member once remarked, "Things are not as simple as what's written in the press." Now, as part of the truth has come to light, we realize that the greatest value lies not in leaked information, but in the inner strength of a human being facing adversity. Catherine, the woman long associated with grace, is writing a new chapter not through visibility, but through quiet courage. Everything has entered a new chapter, one that cannot be reversed. The image of an unchanging, flawless royal family is gradually giving way to a different reality. Behind the velvet curtains of the palace, truth is no longer something that can be neatly packaged and controlled. As the outside world begins to connect the scattered pieces, it becomes clear that this is not merely a delay in a recovery journey. It is the transformation of a legend where royal splendor is being forced to confront vulnerability and deeply human fears. Now, Prince William carries more than the weight of a future king's responsibility. In the shadows of the long corridors of Adelaide Cottage, he finds himself at the very center of the storm as a husband. Sources close to him describe a profound psychological shift. The familiar calm has been replaced by a constant undercurrent of worry. For the first time in his life, diplomatic rules and courtly protocol have become meaningless. This is not a media crisis to be managed. It is a battle to protect the woman he loves most. A battle in which political power has no voice. William, trained from childhood to restrain emotion, now finds himself surrounded by a sense of helplessness before fate. On sleepless nights gazing out the window, he is not searching for political solutions, but for a fragile glimmer of hope within the frightening stillness of the house. The breaking point did not come from natural events, but from a collision between two worlds. On one side, an advisory machine steadfast in its belief in strategic silence to preserve stability. On the other, the heart of someone living through the crisis. Heated debates erupted behind closed doors. Media experts worried about the turbulence of public opinion, but William saw something far more important: the dignity of truth. In a moment that defied all precedent, a private message was sent to the monarch, brief yet resolute. She deserves more than silence. It was a declaration marking the end of an era of forced mystery. William no longer cared about staged photographs or hollow press statements. His only concern was the woman who had walked beside him through life's highs and lows. As tensions reached their peak, King Charles, long known for his extreme caution, made a decision that would completely change the course of events. After witnessing his son's quiet pain and his daughter-in-law's resilience, every remaining barrier of protocol dissolved. In a historic meeting at Clarence House, the king affirmed, "No more hiding. Let the world see the strength of perseverance." This step marked a deeply human shift in power. After a brief private visit to Catherine's hospital bedside, the raw truth reached the heart of the head of the monarchy. What he saw was not a symbol recovering according to plan, but a soul striving to make its way through the valley of life's most grueling trials. When the king left Windsor with a pale face and a heavy spirit, the entire royal household understood the whispers were over, and a new reality had begun. The silence that followed was no longer meant to conceal, but a silence born of respect for a profoundly personal and courageous battle. Everything has truly changed, and history will remember this moment as proof that beneath the royal cloak, the heart remains the most powerful guide of all. In the quiet halls of the palace, an unprecedented struggle for power erupted, but not over the throne, rather over the truth. As cautious voices sought to wrap the situation in vague statements, King Charles exercised a rare prerogative, the decisiveness of a father. For the first time, he set aside all diplomatic convention in favor of transparency. This action not only sent shockwaves through those closest to the palace, but also healed a silent fracture. Charles and William, two generations of monarchy, found common ground in shared pain. They were no longer acting as king and heir, but as two men protecting a world threatened by an invisible adversity. Every word in the forthcoming message was weighed not to preserve appearances, but to honor the dignity of a mother and a wife fighting with resilience. Yet what the world is about to learn is only the tip of the iceberg. Confidential materials and first-hand accounts from insiders reveal a chilling reality. Catherine's trial did not begin recently. Signs of instability had already surfaced in late 2023, hidden behind troubling blood test results. For months, the truth was concealed beneath a veneer of stability. Why did the palace keep it secret? The answer lies in a harsh royal philosophy: the symbol must not be allowed to waver. Even as pain became part of daily life, Catherine continued to appear with a radiant smile, chair meetings, and lead educational initiatives. It was a silent sacrifice, where an iron will struggled to overpower physical exhaustion. Behind the stage lights, the velvet curtains concealed her weakest moments. There were times Catherine collapsed backstage at charity events, yet the swift motion of security and media transformed them into ordinary migraines. William witnessed it all, from worrying weight loss to long, sleepless nights. He pleaded with her to stop, but Catherine, bound by unwavering devotion to duty, refused. Catherine is not only battling adversity, she is fighting to uphold faith for an entire monarchy. This quiet sacrifice between the dazzling stage lights and moments of collapse behind the scenes paints a portrait of a figure far beyond ordinary protocol. Comment 2. If you feel moved and admire the steel will of this crown-bearing woman. Or comment 5 if you have a different reflection on the price she has had to pay. Don't forget to like and subscribe now to continue uncovering these inspiring archival stories and never miss another heart-stirring tale. The tension between an unfallible symbol and a human growing ever more fragile pushed the royal family into a precarious position. Senior aides feared that if both the king and the princess showed weakness simultaneously, the illusion of institutional strength would collapse. They chose silence to protect the throne, but in the shadows of royal power, deep secrets still exist. But when the fortress of silence begins to crack, the whole world witnesses a grueling battle between duty and life itself. The story of Princess Catherine is not just about health. It is a struggle between eternity and true humanity, one that has forever changed the image of the crown. Do you sympathize with this courage? Comment 1 if you admire it, or 0 if you have a different perspective. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can explore the mystery together. There are moments when time itself seems to stand still, when even the most solid stone walls of history cannot hold back the ripples of change. Buckingham Palace has just released a message that has shaken the hearts of millions. Gone are the rigid formalities of royal protocol. King Charles and Prince William appeared together in a rare moment of shared empathy, opening up about a profoundly challenging chapter in the life of Princess Catherine. For months, speculation hung over London like a thick fog. Yet when the truth was finally revealed, its weight surpassed all imagination. As the world holds its breath, the British royal family is confronting a stark reality, one where titles and crowns offer no shield against the unforgiving laws of nature. Before we unravel the deeper meanings of this turning point for the future of the monarchy, join us by subscribing to stay updated with the most authentic and insightful information. In a rare display of unity, the monarch and his heir stood side by side. On their faces, there was no trace of their usual majesty, only the weight of compassion. For an institution that has long held composure as its guiding principle, this moment marked a painful break from tradition. The words were spoken softly, yet their impact felt like a psychological earthquake. This was not an ordinary medical update. It was a vulnerable confession that shattered the illusion of perfection the palace had carefully upheld for over a century. William, long known for his steely resolve, now appeared with an emotion he could scarcely conceal. His voice, though still measured, carried undertones of uncertainty. King Charles, in a moment that transcended his role as sovereign, referred to Catherine as the heart of the family. This was not merely the voice of a monarch. It was the voice of a father watching a loved one endure the storm. That very sincerity sparked an emotional wave that resonated across the globe. From the flickering candles at Windsor to messages sent across oceans, the world is sharing a solemn, reverent silence. Everything has changed because deep down, we all understand this truth. Behind those gilded iron gates lies a quiet battle for peace. But what led to this heartbreaking turning point? To grasp the reality, we must turn back time to the moment when the first cracks began to appear. Princess Catherine's absence was initially regarded as nothing more than a routine period of rest. Yet as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the silence took on the weight of unease. There were no casual photographs, no radiant smiles before the camera's hallmarks of Catherine's public presence. Her complete withdrawal from public life raised a pressing question: was something beyond control unfolding behind the scenes? Even the closest security staff and aides were enveloped in an atmosphere of strict discretion. Privacy was no longer a choice. It had become the final fortress protecting what mattered most. When official engagements were canceled without clear explanation, and when representatives began relying on vague language, the public understood they were witnessing something unprecedented. An anonymous staff member once remarked, "Things are not as simple as what's written in the press." Now, as part of the truth has come to light, we realize that the greatest value lies not in leaked information, but in the inner strength of a human being facing adversity. Catherine, the woman long associated with grace, is writing a new chapter not through visibility, but through quiet courage. Everything has entered a new chapter, one that cannot be reversed. The image of an unchanging, flawless royal family is gradually giving way to a different reality. Behind the velvet curtains of the palace, truth is no longer something that can be neatly packaged and controlled. As the outside world begins to connect the scattered pieces, it becomes clear that this is not merely a delay in a recovery journey. It is the transformation of a legend where royal splendor is being forced to confront vulnerability and deeply human fears. Now, Prince William carries more than the weight of a future king's responsibility. In the shadows of the long corridors of Adelaide Cottage, he finds himself at the very center of the storm as a husband. Sources close to him describe a profound psychological shift. The familiar calm has been replaced by a constant undercurrent of worry. For the first time in his life, diplomatic rules and courtly protocol have become meaningless. This is not a media crisis to be managed. It is a battle to protect the woman he loves most. A battle in which political power has no voice. William, trained from childhood to restrain emotion, now finds himself surrounded by a sense of helplessness before fate. On sleepless nights gazing out the window, he is not searching for political solutions, but for a fragile glimmer of hope within the frightening stillness of the house. The breaking point did not come from natural events, but from a collision between two worlds. On one side, an advisory machine steadfast in its belief in strategic silence to preserve stability. On the other, the heart of someone living through the crisis. Heated debates erupted behind closed doors. Media experts worried about the turbulence of public opinion, but William saw something far more important: the dignity of truth. In a moment that defied all precedent, a private message was sent to the monarch, brief yet resolute. She deserves more than silence. It was a declaration marking the end of an era of forced mystery. William no longer cared about staged photographs or hollow press statements. His only concern was the woman who had walked beside him through life's highs and lows. As tensions reached their peak, King Charles, long known for his extreme caution, made a decision that would completely change the course of events. After witnessing his son's quiet pain and his daughter-in-law's resilience, every remaining barrier of protocol dissolved. In a historic meeting at Clarence House, the king affirmed, "No more hiding. Let the world see the strength of perseverance." This step marked a deeply human shift in power. After a brief private visit to Catherine's hospital bedside, the raw truth reached the heart of the head of the monarchy. What he saw was not a symbol recovering according to plan, but a soul striving to make its way through the valley of life's most grueling trials. When the king left Windsor with a pale face and a heavy spirit, the entire royal household understood the whispers were over, and a new reality had begun. The silence that followed was no longer meant to conceal, but a silence born of respect for a profoundly personal and courageous battle. Everything has truly changed, and history will remember this moment as proof that beneath the royal cloak, the heart remains the most powerful guide of all. In the quiet halls of the palace, an unprecedented struggle for power erupted, but not over the throne, rather over the truth. As cautious voices sought to wrap the situation in vague statements, King Charles exercised a rare prerogative, the decisiveness of a father. For the first time, he set aside all diplomatic convention in favor of transparency. This action not only sent shockwaves through those closest to the palace, but also healed a silent fracture. Charles and William, two generations of monarchy, found common ground in shared pain. They were no longer acting as king and heir, but as two men protecting a world threatened by an invisible adversity. Every word in the forthcoming message was weighed not to preserve appearances, but to honor the dignity of a mother and a wife fighting with resilience. Yet what the world is about to learn is only the tip of the iceberg. Confidential materials and first-hand accounts from insiders reveal a chilling reality. Catherine's trial did not begin recently. Signs of instability had already surfaced in late 2023, hidden behind troubling blood test results. For months, the truth was concealed beneath a veneer of stability. Why did the palace keep it secret? The answer lies in a harsh royal philosophy: the symbol must not be allowed to waver. Even as pain became part of daily life, Catherine continued to appear with a radiant smile, chair meetings, and lead educational initiatives. It was a silent sacrifice, where an iron will struggled to overpower physical exhaustion. Behind the stage lights, the velvet curtains concealed her weakest moments. There were times Catherine collapsed backstage at charity events, yet the swift motion of security and media transformed them into ordinary migraines. William witnessed it all, from worrying weight loss to long, sleepless nights. He pleaded with her to stop, but Catherine, bound by unwavering devotion to duty, refused. Catherine is not only battling adversity, she is fighting to uphold faith for an entire monarchy. This quiet sacrifice between the dazzling stage lights and moments of collapse behind the scenes paints a portrait of a figure far beyond ordinary protocol. Comment 2. If you feel moved and admire the steel will of this crown-bearing woman. Or comment 5 if you have a different reflection on the price she has had to pay. Don't forget to like and subscribe now to continue uncovering these inspiring archival stories and never miss another heart-stirring tale. The tension between an unfallible symbol and a human growing ever more fragile pushed the royal family into a precarious position. Senior aides feared that if both the king and the princess showed weakness simultaneously, the illusion of institutional strength would collapse. They chose silence to protect the throne, but forgot the price of isolation. Catherine's story is not merely the tale of a royal. It is a lesson on the limits of humanity when faced with a higher duty. As cameras prepared to capture historic footage, the world would come to understand sometimes the greatest strength does not lie in the crown atop one's head, but in the courage to face the truth, even when that truth has the power to change everything we thought we knew about a monarchy. For the sake of stability, a curtain of secrecy was drawn. Catherine accepted it, trusting that these trials were only a brief chapter in her journey of recovery. Yet time and the laws of nature wait for no arrangement. As the palace prepared to speak, reality had already moved beyond their control. The most loyal aides began to question: is silence still golden, or is it slowly eroding trust between an age-old institution and the public? William, torn between his duty as a prince and his heart as a husband, began to realize that the fortress of secrets was becoming a prison of pain. The throne, built on influence and image, now faced a cruel test of sincerity. Then, without any staged ceremony or coordinated press release, Catherine made a move that shook the nation. In a simple setting, a garden where the laughter of children once echoed, she chose to face the world directly. In just 94 seconds, the royal veil was completely pierced by a heartbreaking honesty. There was no royal glamour, no shield of advisors, only a woman speaking about the trials of her life with absolute clarity. She began with words of gratitude, but it was what came next that made millions of hearts stop. Every word Catherine spoke swept through the silence like a storm. She did not dwell on technical details, but spoke of family resilience and the right to retain a private space amid the chaos. Yet beneath that composure lay a profound emotion, a confession so sincere that it was clear this was not merely a medical update, but a deeply human sharing about the fragility of life. The world's response was an immense wave of emotion. From national leaders to ordinary citizens, everyone found connection through shared pain. Spontaneous candlelight vigils and quiet prayers were no longer for a title, but for a mother and wife, standing at the center of a storm, choosing truth over tradition. That moment has forever changed the image of the monarchy. The acknowledgement of vulnerability shattered the cold, distant facade, revealing the raw beauty of truth. Behind the scenes, emotional wounds remained. William, in an unrestrained moment at a public event, shed tears before the crowd, an unprecedented image in modern history. Even the press, usually relentless in pursuing every detail, chose to step back out of respect for this silence. They understood that this was no longer news to dissect, but a journey of the soul unfolding in real time. The monarchy has now transformed. It is no longer defined solely by titles or lineage, but by the courage to live authentically and embrace one's true humanity. Catherine's story is not just one of survival. It is a lesson on the cost of silence and the power of sincerity. She did what no royal symbol before her had dared reveal: the fragility beneath a radiant cloak. It is precisely this openness that has turned Catherine from a princess into a guiding soul, forcing a palace, once a fortress of secrets, to move in rhythm with her heartbeat. Yet while the world honors Catherine's bravery behind the heavy oak doors, another battle quietly ignites. This is not merely a fight against illness, but a struggle shaping the future of a 1,000-year-old institution. In strategic meeting rooms, the air is thick with calculation. Harsh questions arose. Who would represent the monarchy if Catherine's radiance receded? Old alliances fractured, and new schemes began to take root. Not everyone looked in the same direction, and not every heart within the castle beat in rhythm with the woman resting. As the reality of Catherine's absence became a daunting prospect, conflicting viewpoints collided. Some voices sought to fill the void with traditional rituals, aiming to maintain the monarchy's public presence. But this intervention met a steel wall of loyalty. Princess Anne and the Duchess of Edinburgh rose as guardians of Catherine's legacy. They understood that hastily replacing a symbol was not only a betrayal of familial bonds, but also an act that could destroy public trust. To them, Catherine was the last thread capable of mending a monarchy facing the fractures of the age. At the center of the storm, Prince William stood firm like a lighthouse amid turbulent seas. He rejected all contingency plans, all possible replacements, no matter how minor. To William, acknowledging a plan B would be tantamount to surrendering to fate, and that was something he would never do. His cold decisiveness before the advisors sent a powerful message. Catherine is not a pawn on the political chessboard. She is the soul of this household. Despite the crushing pressure to maintain the continuity of the institution, and despite drafts of task restructuring already laid out on the table, William chose to place his trust in the miracle of willpower. Then, just as the darkness of doubt loomed heaviest, a ray of light pierced the night. A new message emerged, not from aides but from Catherine herself. With heartfelt sincerity, she shared what once seemed impossible. There were signs of triumph in the battle. Her illness had abated. Light had returned to the eyes of the mother, the wife, and the future queen. She spoke of gratitude, of resilience forged through the darkest hours. Treatment had borne fruit, and life once again asserted itself against the cruelty of fate. Though the joyous news had arrived, shadows of the past left profound lessons. This crisis revealed a truth. The prestige of a monarchy does not lie in stone walls or noble titles, but in the human connection between its leaders and the people. Catherine has triumphed not only over illness, but also over outdated rules redefining the value of the crown. A new chapter is unfolding where strength comes not from mystery, but from sincerity and compassion. News of Catherine's remission spread across the world like a wave of quiet jubilation. The media called it a miracle, and social media erupted with prayers. Yet for Catherine, this was not a blazing victory anthem. She faced this reality with the insight of someone who had walked through the valley of darkness, not as a destination, but as a steadfast step on a long path full of uncertainties. Though now stable, the mark of stormy months still lingers in every gesture. Her voice, though steadier, carries the breath of someone who has touched the very limits of endurance. Catherine's candidness about her recovery process has received wholehearted support from the professional community. 6 yard. Within the palace, a new order had been established. Prince William, with devoted protection, set strict boundaries for his wife's return. Catherine reappeared still graceful, but carrying a more subdued and wise beauty. She no longer tried to force herself to shine. She simply existed, and that presence, though more delicate than before, held the power to ignite hope stronger than any speech. A moment touched the hearts of humanity, the image of Catherine walking hand in hand with her children across the school grounds. It was not a royal ritual, but a wordless message of life continuing. Beyond the palace walls, beyond noble titles, she was first and foremost a mother fighting to preserve her children's peace amid the storm. Yet behind that calm tension within the palace remained. Unanswered questions about the future still lingered. What would happen if darkness returned? These doubts were no longer brushed aside. They became catalysts for decisions that could reshape the foundation of an entire monarchy. King Charles, standing beside the heir, acknowledged a profound truth. Catherine's courage had redefined the image of royalty. She achieved what decades of protocol and ceremony could not, restoring humanity to the monarchy. Now power no longer lay in displays of authority, but in the resilience to endure the world's scrutiny while battling the fiercest personal wars. Immutable rules were quietly being adjusted. The palace no longer tried to maintain the illusion of eternal strength. They learned to accept vulnerability as part of evolution. Catherine's legacy would not be confined to royal procedures. She placed compassion at the heart of every action. Quiet visits, advocacy for mental health, and early childhood education now carried a more vivid meaning. She taught the world that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it is the whisper of a mother holding on to what is most precious. In the darkest days, she is said to have written private letters to George, Charlotte, and Louis, messages for the future if she could not return. Whether or not those letters were ever opened, they became part of the legend of a woman who stood at the edge and chose to fight. Catherine did not merely cling to her role. She turned her pain into purpose. Her battle may not be over, but her strength has redrawn the map of the monarchy's destiny. The world will never see her the same way again, for they have glimpsed the portrait of a queen in spirit, a woman who reminded us that even in adversity, grace and determination can create miracles. Catherine's journey is not merely the story of a title or a crown, but an epic of willpower, sincerity, and the cost of compassion. She taught us that the greatest strength sometimes does not lie in majesty, but in the courage to be vulnerable and honest with the world. A new chapter of royal history has begun, a chapter written in humanity rather than in rigid ritual. At this point, we want to hear from you. How do you feel about Catherine's inspiring journey of revival? Do you think this humanization could help the British monarchy remain resilient amid the challenges of the modern era? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We truly value every perspective. If this video has brought you special emotions or valuable insights, don't forget to hit like to show support for our content team. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss in-depth documentaries about some of the world's most influential figures. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos. When Queen Camilla bent down to speak with Princess Charlotte, she didn't realize that Catherine was watching. And what happened next changed everything. It all started like a typical spring weekend in the royal schedule, planned down to the minute, packed with family obligations and set against the backdrop of Windsor Castle. But something about this particular gathering